Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and we're going to go back 40 years from this month, from the month of February. We're going back to February of 1986, and comics were changed forever in that month with the release of Batman The Dark Knight Returns. This is universally known as one of the greatest graphic novels ever printed. I guess you can put it up there with Watchmen, one or two. Me personally, I would probably go with The Dark Knight Returns. And I'm being honest with you. It's biased. I'm a huge Batman fan. Love Batman. I'm staring at like four posters right now in my office of Batman. I am a huge Batman fan. So it's a little biased there, but I can acknowledge that Watchmen is a great graphic novel. So if you ever say like, oh no, Watchmen is the greatest graphic novel of all time, I'm not gonna fight you. I'm not I'm not gonna debate you on that because I would probably agree with you. It depends on when you ask me. It depends on what day you ask me, and I would agree. But even if I disagree, I would bow down and say, yeah, you're probably right. But this really changed how we looked at the character of Batman at this point. Now, I would take you back to 7-year-old Kevin. That's how old I was in 1986. And by this time, I had started reading some comic books, started getting into it because I've watched Super Friends around this time. I've watched the old reruns of Batman with Adam West and whatnot. So I got familiar with the character and grew a love for this character to the point where I, I saw Batman as this campy character that I saw Adam West portray, even in Super Friends and whatnot. Batman meets teamed up with Scooby Doo and all this other foolishness that took place in the 80s. I was in love with Batman. That was my favorite comic book character. So I didn't read it when it first came out. I do recall that much. It was a couple of years, I want to say around the release of Tim Burton's Batman starring Michael Keaton. I don't know if it was before or after. Can't my memory is pretty good. But the older I get, things get a little fuzzy. But I don't remember exactly the moment I picked up this graphic novel because I know by the time I began reading it, all four issues was out. I know that much. And so I read all four issues at once, and I was just blown away by how dark this character is or had become, and how Frank Miller had created this Gotham City that was, how can I put it, 80s. It was just a hyper violent 80s depiction of Gotham City. And it blew my mind. It really blew my mind because it was realistic, but not, you know, realistic in the sense that it's not your dad's Batman story. This isn't your dad's Gotham City. This was a seasoned, lived in Gotham City that the graphic novel did a great job of depicting. And so that leads us to today, 40 years later, almost to the day. And I'm like, it's been 40 years. I was just doom scrolling on the internet one day, and I just happened to see this pop up somewhere, and I can't find where I saw it at, that this was the 40th year anniversary of The Dark Knight Returns. I'm like, oh my God, I got to talk about this. I got to talk about The Dark Knight Returns and its impact on comics and other medias, even in film. We've got two movies that were adapted from this graphic novel, animated films. It was Batman: The Dark Knight Returns Part One, and of course Batman: The Dark Knight Part Two. Now, we're going to talk about those two films, and we're going to talk about other films that were plucked from this graphic novel that I want to talk about. And I don't know any other time I'm going to talk about this film. I'm pretty sure you all know, but I'm going to leave you in suspense anyway. In any event, in case you don't know, you've been living under a rock for 40 years. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns is a 1986 four-issue comic book miniseries that was written by the great Frank Miller. And it tells an alternate story of Bruce Wayne, who at this point is 55 years old. He returns after a decade of retirement, of fighting crime in Gotham City, and he must face this new uprise of crime in Gotham City by this new group called the Mutants. He's fighting them, disposing of them, and his return sparks so much controversy with the U.S. government, with the people of Gotham City, with his old buddy Superman as well. So it is a lot that's going on in this comic series that was just amazing to me. And I'm not going to go through point by point of the comic book. I've reread it in anticipation of this talk that we're going to have today, but I'm not going to go beat by beat because we'll be here till the 80th anniversary of it, because there's a lot to talk about in this comic book series. And I'll employ all of you, if you have not read the comic book, if you have not read this graphic novel, and maybe you're not into comic books, but this is one you need to read because there's so much in it, man. There's uh uh Joker is in this, Two-Face is in this, and they play pivotal roles in there that is just like, what? It's crazy. We have a brand new Robin that was introduced, a female Robin nonetheless, the first and only female Robin up to this point. Carrie Kelly, she is the new Robin here. You have the new mutant street gang of the mutants that pop up in Gotham City that is brutal to say the least. Like I said, this was a four-part miniseries, and all four parts had a title. Before it came together just to become Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, it was The Dark Knight Returns was the first issue, The Dark Knight Triumph was the second issue, Hunt the Dark Knight was the third, and the final one was The Dark Knight Falls. So let's break it down. I decided to break it down in all four issues, and we'll discuss it that way. So let's go part one. Part one, The Dark Knight Returns. And this sets up everything that's going to happen throughout these four issues. And in this version, we're introduced to a dystopian version of Gotham City in 1986. Now, let me start off by saying this comic is dated. If you pick it up now and this is your first time knowing about it, reading it and consuming it will feel dated because it's 1986. It feels 1986 with a lot of 1986 references that are pretty dated, and in comparisons to 40 years later, of course. But at the time it was like innovative, but it is what it is. But I'm just forewarning those who have not read The Dark Knight Returns. In any event, this is a dystopian version of Gotham City, and we are introduced to Bruce Wayne, and he's 55 years old. And when I was reading it, what that was, about a month ago? No, it was about 2 weeks ago. When I was reading it, and then I rewatched the animated movies, I'm like 55, and they kept saying 55, and Bruce Wayne is broken down. He looks about 85. He looks Batman Beyondish, but I'm like, my God, I'm only a few years away from 55. To put it in perspective, my brother is 55 years old. Matter of fact, just turned 55, and I'm like, man, my brother is different. My brother, he moves better than me because he was in the Marines and all that stuff. So he has stamina, unlike myself who did nothing in life. But that's neither here nor there. But 55 is not that old. It's not that old. But when you're fighting crime every night, I guess it is. And so he life has beaten Bruce Wayne down. And the illustrations in this comic series is phenomenal. I love the way this graphic novel was illustrated, and he is just this big hulking looking figure, bruh. But a lot of them are. That's Frank Miller's style. But it's cool how they just showed him as this grizzled old man, but in good shape for an old man. Anyways, he retired 10 years ago at this point. He had retired after the death of Jason Todd, the last Robin. And this is something that has been consistent. I know this is an alternate story, but this is something that had become canon throughout DC Comics when it comes to Batman, Jason Todd's death, because a lot of things have sprung off from Jason Todd's death. You have uh, uh, the Red Hood, you have the Bat Family, and so much stuff has spun off from that. So that stayed consistent throughout comics. It wasn't just relegated to this graphic novel, but in this story, that's what caused him to retire from being Batman and hang up the cape and the cowl. But in doing that, crime had began to run rampant through Gotham City. Of course, there's no Batman, so you got this new gang called the Mutants that have just taken over the city basically. And one day, after watching the news, the mutant crime, about the mutant crime and whatnot, Bruce decides, you know what? I still got a little bit left in the tank. I can still fit the cowl. The cape still can fit. So he becomes Batman yet again, and he stops multiple assaults, including one with two girls. And one of those girls was Carrie Kelly and her friend. And they were being targeted by the mutants, but Batman stopped it. But this inspires Carrie to become Robin, unbeknownst to Batman, but does it anyway. And so with all this going on, Batman's return is reported uh, by the news and by word of mouth, and this reaches the Joker, who is in Arkham Asylum at this point being treated, and he's basically been sedated to a sense, but they're playing the news and at the asylum, and they're talking about Batman. Now, granted, this is a name that he probably haven't heard in 10 years. And in his catatonic state, he wakes up. He hears that name and he wakes up. It's like, Batman, something in him clicked because he's the yin to his yang. And it's the craziest bromance in all of media, not just comics, in every walk of life. But meanwhile, also at the asylum, you have Harvey Dent, who we all know as Two-Face. He's there, but he has undergone this treatment. He underwent this therapy, this plastic surgery to fix his face. And so he's whole on both sides now. He's not insane, at least so they think. And so Batman, he stops an armed robbery, and he finds out that the criminals are working for Harvey Dent after he was released, because he was quote unquote cured. at the asylum. And Batman goes on a hunt for Two-Face now, or Harvey Dent, as he's called in this comic, because after he left the asylum, after his treatment, he disappeared. So Batman goes to talk to Jim Gordon, who is the commissioner, but he's on the way out. Jim is retiring after all these years. And he informs Jim that it may Harvey Dent may be planning something bigger. He may be planning some scheme uh uh that's gonna hurt the city and whatnot. So soon after Harvey Dent, he announced his intentions to hold Gotham City ransom with a bomb. And so after Batman defeats Harvey Dent and his goons, he discovers that Harvey Dent's mind had completely warped into his Two-Face persona. See, they fixed his face, but he didn't see it as that. When he looked in the mirror, he thought that they gave him, the messed up side of his face. His whole face was the messed up side instead of vice versa. So he clicked out. That's what he sees when he looks. But he's normal. He looks normal. But his mind isn't. His mind is completely gone. And so that was issue 1. That's what we got introduced in issue 1. And you're immediately hooked at this point, because not only is Batman back to his old tricks again, so is his foes. And it's in a believable way that they're still around, and why they're still around and how they're able to be still around was such a genius move by Frank Miller. And I thought that was very, very interesting. So we move on to issue 2, or part 2 of this episode, and that is The Dark Knight Triumph. And in this issue, we open up in the White House, and we see Superman talking to the president. And in this version, if you know your history, in 1986, the president was Ronald Reagan, and that's who is in this book. And so Superman is talking to Ronald Reagan, and they're discussing Batman's shenanigans that's going on in Gotham City. With President Reagan suggesting that he might have to arrest Batman, because at this point, all the superheroes had stopped superheroing. Batman retired. Wonder Woman went back to Themyscira, and so on and so forth. Everybody just gave it up due to this law that they passed. So the only one who was quote unquote active is Superman, and he works for the government. And the reason let's be real, the reason he's active, because who's going to stop him? Who's going to stop Superman from being Superman? But they worked it out. He works for the government instead. And so we go back to Gotham City, and Carrie Kelly, being inspired by Batman, she buys this imitation Robin suit or costume, I should say, and she goes on a search for him, to try to be recruited as the new Robin. And so Batman attacks the mutants at this city dump with the Batmobile, and the Batmobile is more of a tank in this issue, and it's beautiful, man. I love that Batmobile. But the mutant leader, he goes hand to hand with Batman, and pretty much hands Batman his first real butt whooping in comics. I mean, but it's excused because, number one, he's younger, he's more violent, he's willing to take it to that next level, aka kill. Whereas Batman at this point, he's older, and he's not willing to go to that next level. So he lost. he was physically outdone in that first battle. He was almost beaten to death, to be honest with you. He was man, that dude put the mollywop on him. I'm telling you, it was brutal. But lo and behold, the new Robin, Carrie Kelly, she comes in causes a diversion right before they are able to kill him, and gets him out of there, returning him to the Batcave where Alfred is still around. Alfred, Alfred, at this point, I don't think they mention his age in there. I don't think they ever mention Alfred's age. I don't recall Alfred's age being discussed in any Batman comic, and I've read a lot of Batman comics. But at this point, you gotta think he gotta be close to 100 years old. But he's still Alfred Pennyworth, man. I mean, he's there. As long as Bruce is alive, he's gonna be alive. He's not going anywhere. But anyways, uh, he tends to Bruce's wounds and uh, nurse him back to health. And in a shocker, Bruce welcomes Carrie Kelly. He's impressed by her bravery at that moment to come in and save him and whatnot, and he feels that's something he can work with. He can work with this new Robin, and I figured that had to be tough because the last Robin he had died on his watch, and so he, but to take Carrie Kelly under his wing, without any trials, was pretty jarring. It was jarring for me when I first read it back in the day, because be 100% honest with y'all, I wasn't receptive to the new Robin. And it's not because she was a female. I wasn't receptive of Jason Todd. I was always a Dick Grayson guy. I just did not feel we should have changed Robins. I never agreed with that. But as I got older, I've accepted it more, and not just recently. I'm talking about, once I got to teens and 20s and stuff like that. I started being more receptive of it, because around the time that I wasn't really deep into comics like I was in the past. I really just whenever I had the time to pick it up, I'll randomly pick them up. But once I got back into them and started reading them and, learning the stories, the backstories and whatnot, I started appreciating, especially Jason Todd. But I still don't like Jason Todd. I understand why they voted for him to die. That, in case y'all don't know, that's how he died in the comics. It was left up to a vote by the readers. Do you save Jason Todd or let him die? Basically, they let him die. Everybody voted to kill Jason Todd, so they did. Good on DC Comics for going through with that promise. But anyways, I thought that was a cool moment, though. It was cool to bring her in as the new prodigy, so to speak. So Batman strategically, after being nursed back to health, strategically goes back and defeats the mutant leader in a fight surrounded by the mutants. And now this is against Alfred's advice, of course, because Alfred's like, man, he almost killed you. He's younger than you. He's stronger than you. He's faster than you. But one thing we all know, we've seen the memes. We've heard the sayings, but it is true. The worst thing you could do is give Batman prep time. Once he figures you out, that's it. There's no beating him. And basically, Batman took that butt whooping to figure out this mutant leader's style. And that next fight they had, it wasn't even a fight. And this wasn't even 100% Bruce Wayne. This was probably closer to 40% Batman that took on the mutant leader. But he destroyed him. And when he destroyed him, he knew if he could take out the leader, everybody else would just surrender. And that's basically what they did. And so after seeing Batman defeat their leader, the mutants disbanded into smaller groups. One of the groups renamed themselves the Son of Batman, or Sons of Batman. And they use excessive violence against criminals, which, also angered people as well. Yeah, okay, you're stopping criminals, but you're using excessive violence to do so. which is kind of what Batman is doing at this point, but not to the extreme that they are. So that was issue 2. We move on to issue 3, The Hunt, or Hunt the Dark Knight. And in this issue, this is when Superman comes into the fold. We have Clark Kent coming to talk to Bruce Wayne under the advice of the president, and is trying to convince him to pack it in. You had your fun. You know, you came back, you did what you did. Now go back into hiding. And of course, Bruce ain't having that. But before they can really go back and forth, Superman had to go to this Latin American country, Coto Maltese, which we have seen and heard of in other comics as well. This is another thing that was taken from the comics. I think we saw it in live action in the Suicide Squad, Coto Maltese, and it was mentioned in Batman 1989, the Tim Burton Batman by Vicky Vale. And so this is a prominent country, fictional country in DC Comics. And he got involved with that conflict to try to evade World War III at this point. So we go back to Gotham City. Gotham City is prepping for this new police commissioner, when Jim Gordon steps down, and this new commissioner, Ellen, Yandel, she's coming in to replace Jim Gordon, and she declares that Batman is a wanted criminal because he's a vigilante, So we can't have that. We can't have it. We got enough problems, let alone a vigilante running around causing havoc. So you have that going on. Meanwhile, you have the Joker. He found a way to manipulate the caretakers at the Arkham Asylum to allow him to talk on this TV talk show, where he murders everyone with his trademark toxin, and then he escapes. And now this is also an element that we saw in Joker. Not Folie à Deux, but the good one, the first Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. Not a direct adaptation of that, but that element going on a talk show and killing the host. But in this graphic novel, he killed everybody in the studio. But he escapes. So Batman and Robin, they track him down at this county fair, where he's also trying to evade the police, who are on his back, because the new commissioner has declared him public enemy number 1. And so Batman fights the Joker. He pretty much vowed to stop him permanently. So he was prepared to kill Joker. Finally, he was finally prepared. I know he has that rule, but if it was one individual to break that rule on all these years, it's the Joker. Because him leaving the Joker alive has caused more death than anything. So it's like all those deaths are on Batman's hands, basically. And that's part of the reason. I'm going to divert for a second here. And that's part of the reason, as I gotten older, I grew up a hardcore Batman fan, which I still am, but I identify more with the Joker, not the homicidal side. I'm not advocating that, but I identify with the Joker because in Joker's mind, the world is crazy. He's the only one that is sane. So sometimes I feel like that. I feel like that more often than not. So I do identify with him more now that I'm older, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But the real point I wanted to make here is the fact that all the death and destruction that the Joker has caused throughout these years are on Batman, especially, more recently in this comic, where all the people in that studio, all the people at that talk show died because of Batman. He was fine ish. He was chilling until he heard Batman had returned. And so with Batman returning, he returned and indirectly caused the deaths of all these people. And so they go fisticuffs. I mean, brutal, brutal. Batman, he paralyzed the Joker, but he stopped short of killing him. He broke his neck, but didn't snap his neck. Now, this was, I mean, in all my 47 years on this earth, I have never, in comics, television, movies, in real life, seen anything like this. And it still blows my mind. With him halfway breaking the Joker's neck, paralyzing him, the Joker was so mad. Not that he paralyzed him, the fact that Batman refused to kill him. That just out of all the things through all these years, that's the one thing that disappointed the Joker. So him feeling him feeling Batman was so much of a coward to do it, he did it himself. If nobody else is gonna do it, I'm gonna do it myself. The Joker literally broke his own neck and killed himself. I've never seen anything like that in my life. It still is seared in my head. And it was on a comic, it was in the comic panel, but I could just feel it and hear the crack when he did it. Because he didn't use his hands. He just turned his head to the point where he cracked. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Still top 5 deaths in all of media for me. That Joker is a beast. Even in death, he's a beast. So that leads us to the final issue of this graphic novel, part 4, The Dark Knight Falls. There's a citywide manhunt now. There's a manhunt for Batman. Elsewhere, Superman, he's fighting with the Soviet Union, with these nuclear warheads. He takes the nuclear warheads, one of the nuclear warheads, and detonates it in a desert, which almost killed him. I was confused by that when I first read it, but as I got deeper into comics, I realized, oh, well, this can happen. You can almost incapacitate Superman, but it'll literally take a nuclear weapon to do it. But even with that, it didn't kill him. It just nearly killed him. But he survived by crawling to these sunflowers, oddly enough, and he absorbed the sun energy from those plants that was in a jungle nearby. And once again, cool, innovative ways, something I hadn't seen up to that point. I was like, man, this is genius. Also, the United States is hit with this EMP, this electromagnetic pulse, and the result, it pretty much caused chaos during the blackout. So in Gotham, Batman and Robin, they take the remaining mutants and the sons of Batman into this non-lethal gang that I don't think they had a name for them all, but they combined them all to help Gotham become the safest city in the country, and it worked. They actually got them to maintain or contain, I should say, the chaos that was about to erupt in Gotham City. And so this embarrassed the United States government. They were embarrassed by this because they are on a hunt for this vigilante, this public enemy, and now you have him being a hero. And so now they look like fools at this point. And so they ordered, or I should say, President Reagan ordered Superman to take Batman into custody. But Superman, he knew Batman, he wasn't going into custody. He wasn't going to allow him to take him into custody. You have to kill him. but he's under orders, so he demands to meet him. And Batman, he chooses Crime Alley, which is so poetic. Crime Alley. Once again, if you're living under a rock, that is the alley where his parents were murdered. And so Superman, he tries to first reason with Batman, but Batman wasn't having it. He uses his technological inventions to fight him, to get even ground on him during the battle. Superman, uh, well, first let me say, Batman had this echo suit, or this what can I call this suit? This Superman fighting suit. And so he has this suit that can withstand, or at least attempt to withstand, the power of Superman. But we all know that when that fight first started, Superman was holding back. He didn't want to kill Bruce. That wasn't his intent. But he has this suit, but Superman manages to breach it, to compromise it. However, out of the blue, we get Green Arrow, Oliver Queen. He shoots Superman with this kryptonite tipped arrow that weakens him. And now a little backstory on that. We find out that Superman took Green Arrow's arm. He severed his arm. And that was because of this superheroic, I don't know, act that that rid the world of superheroes. And Oliver Queen wasn't having it. Oliver Queen got the same temperament as Batman, so he wasn't going to go down without a fight. And Superman took his arm. I mean, how can you shoot an arrow with one arm? So he took his arm. But anyways, he finds a way to shoot that arrow and weakens Superman in an act of revenge. And so he beats him, bro. Batman beat Superman to almost to death. And we have one of the most iconic lines in all of comic book lore. I want you to remember, Clark, in all your days to come, in all your most private moments, I want you to remember my hands at your throat. I want you to remember the one man that beat you. And at that moment, Bruce caught a heart attack. He had a sudden heart attack and he died. And I thought, bruh, this is poetry. This was this was poetry just spilled out on a comic book. It's comic books like this. When I hear people say that comic books are kiddie, it ain't for me. Oh, you read comic books, you're a nerd. All that foolishness. Read this. Read The Dark Knight Returns, and then come with that same energy. There's no such thing. This is phenomenal, man. Phenomenal. So after the quote unquote death of Bruce Wayne, Alfred, he destroys the Batcave. He catches a fatal stroke and die. Exposing Batman as Bruce Wayne. The fortune, his fortune disappears. All that money, the billions of dollars, they disappear. After his funeral, it is revealed that his death was staged. It was staged. He was in a suspended viral life thing. It was something. He took some type of chemical agent that slowed his heart rate down to the point that you would thought he was dead. Even fooled Clark Kent, who can hear his heart. And that's how he got exposed. Because Clark, he was at the funeral and he winked at Carrie Kelly, who was there. because he heard Bruce Wayne's heartbeat in the grave. And he just looked at the grave and smiled. And he knew that he got over. He got him. So after that, we find that Bruce Wayne, he's leading Robin. He got Oliver Queen, the other follower, the sons of Batman. They're in this cave, and it's beyond the Batcave, but he's preparing to continue the war on crime, and that was the end of this saga, this graphic novel. Bruh, like I said, I'm not gonna argue with you if you feel that this isn't number one on the list, but it's definitely top three. Gotta be top three graphic novels of all time. This was so entertaining. All four issues were great. All four. And they all ended like on these epic little endings. It wasn't really a cliffhanger per se. It was just great endings that could stand alone, but it kept going. Even with this, even with the final one, I always expected more to come out. And they did have sequels. They did have sequel comics, or graphic novels to this, in a sense. They had a prequel, Batman Year One, that Frank Miller did. Spawn in Batman, this little crossover event that you had with Batman and Spawn. But the direct sequel, the Dark Knight Strikes Again, that was basically 3 years after the Dark Knight Returns, I believe. That's the one. He's trained. I think he's training all of his followers, and I think Lex Luthor is involved in this, and all. It's a lot of there. Catwoman and Superman, Wonder Woman. The Flash is in it. Oh, it was a whole bunch in that one. The Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, that came out a few years ago. I know it was in the 2000s. I can't remember exactly what year, but uh, I didn't read that one. That one I didn't read because I heard it got some bad reviews and I never went back. I always said I would, but I've yet to go back to read it. But yeah, they had I think another one after that too, but I didn't read those two either. But that's it for those. But going into other media, the movies, the animated films, Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, I loved it. It was a pretty much a beat by beat adaptation. I didn't realize how close of an adaptation it was. Because I'm used to seeing such a departure when it translates from medias. But this didn't. You had a couple of changes, like a couple of lines of dialogue here or there, which is expected. But as far as the story is concerned, the story beats and the main plot points, it's all there. It was basically just a motion comic. That's what it felt like watching it. Peter Weller provides the voice of Bruce Wayne, Batman, in these two films. And man, look, it took me a minute to actually receive that because we were still deep into Kevin Conroy. This before his untimely passing. And I was like, man, Kevin Conroy could still do an older version of Bruce Wayne. Why are they getting Peter Weller? And I like Peter Weller. In case you don't know, he played RoboCop. I like his voice and all, but as Batman, but it worked. It took me a minute to warm up to it, but it worked. I loved his voice, that old, grizzled, beaten voice, but with power behind it. Yeah, it was a perfect choice, as far as casting is concerned, for the telling of this particular story. I highly recommend watching those two films. If you're not a reader and you just want to watch a film, but watch the films. Watch those two movies. They are a direct adaptation of this graphic novel. Live action wise, I always wanted a live action adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, and we never got it. a true adaptation. We got pieces of it throughout films involving Batman, but never a straight up adaptation. There was an attempt. They almost did it. And it was, I want to say, after Batman Forever, that they were going to do a adaptation, but they decided to go with Batman and Robin instead. I don't know what they were drinking, smoking, or shooting up their arms, but whatever. But they decided to go that route. But they were going to attempt to do an adaptation, a live action adaptation. Clint Eastwood was considered for Batman in this version. David Bowie was considered for the Joker in the live action version. And that would have been perfect. I think that's perfect. Think about the time this was going to come out. This was late 90s. That is perfect. David Bowie would have been great as Joker. This particular Joker, oh, he would have fit in like a glove. This would have been great. Clint Eastwood, I think he still would have been too old at that time, but I think they could have made it work. I think he would have worked out pretty well at that point, because this was around the time Unforgiven came out. And so, yeah, I could have saw that. But no, they decided against it. Now, like I said, they picked the bones of this graphic novel and just threw little nuggets throughout the films, throughout the Batman film series. You know, you had the Tumbler that was in, all of Christopher Nolan's Batman's, that Batmobile version. That was a version of the design from The Dark Knight Returns, a smaller version. The one that was in the comics was bigger than the Tumbler, but that was basically a grounded version of the Tumbler, or of the Batmobile from The Dark Knight Returns. Now, the one that is most, I guess you could say, the closest that we ever got to a live action adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns was, of course, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which came out in 2016. They borrowed so much from that comic. It makes me mad, because that's the one film I never got a chance to talk about. This film and on this show, I should say, because I talk about it a lot, but I never got a chance to talk about it on this show. This is a first. But I wanted this movie to work so bad. I have never in my life wanted a movie to be good so bad in my life, and haven't since. I've never felt that way since. This movie, I don't feel the way other people feel. They like, oh man, that movie was horrible. I don't think the movie is horrible. Could it have been better? Absolutely. But was it horrible? No, I don't think it's horrible. It's rewatchable, shockingly enough. I've rewatched that movie a couple of times. And so it's not like offensive to my senses. But what makes that movie so disjointed, there was way too much going on. Way too much going on. And if they would have stuck to one little thing, you know, like adapting The Dark Knight Returns would have been perfect. Would have been perfect for this particular story, for what Zack Snyder was trying to do. But they got so caught up in trying to create this cinematic universe and introduce Flash, introduce Aquaman, introduce Wonder Woman, and put Doomsday in it, and set up the Justice League, and oh my God, it was just too much. And still trying to make it a sequel to Man of Steel at the same time. It made absolutely no sense. But that's a whole nother show. I'll have to dedicate an entire show to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And being as though this is the 10-year anniversary of that movie, I'm probably going to do it this year. I'm probably going to have a show dedicated. It actually is no probably to it. I will have that coming up in a couple of months. Stay tuned for that. But as far as the elements of The Dark Knight Returns in this film, I would say 60 to 75% of this movie is The Dark Knight Returns. Every scene that involves Batman is basically from The Dark Knight Returns. Even dialogue. There is dialogue that is taken straight from the comic book. It is it is mind-boggling. You have, let's start with the similarity. You have the Robin. You had Jason Todd's death. We see Jason Todd's suit or costume in the Batcave on display because he was murdered. That's in there. You have Bruce Wayne being older and hardened, mid 50s probably. I don't think they ever stated what Ben Affleck's age was in the film because he didn't look 55, but I would say he's 55. But he definitely wasn't grizzled and Clint Eastwood looking. I think Ben Affleck could still play Batman. I really enjoyed Ben Affleck's performance as Batman. I think he's one of the best Batman live action adaptations that we've got. I know, at me, I don't care. That's my opinion. But he was older. He had retired. He after 10 years. He fought Superman. He had the Echo suit. He used the kryptonite arrow. Didn't have Green Arrow to shoot it, but it was in there. The fight they had, the bomb going off, the nuclear bomb that almost killed Superman, that was in here. He had to float up to the sun to get his power back. You had all of those elements, everything that was basically in the comic was in here. Mind-boggling. It was like, my God. Like I stated before, the Joker, the 2019 film, with the talk show that came straight from the comics here. The Justice League, Zack Snyder's version, that the good one. The Batmobile that's at the very end, that was the actual Batmobile, the exact same design. That huge tank that Batman is standing on top of at the end of that movie, that is what's in the comic. In an interview recently, I say recently, but it was the last couple of years. Zack Snyder did an interview with Hollywood Reporter or somebody, and they asked him, if he ever would come back to DC and do a film. And he said, "There's only one thing. There's only one thing I will come back to do, and that is to do a live action adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, a true representation." I would love that. I'm not mad at that because what he did in Batman v Superman was actually good. Outside of that, that's when it started. The movie was falling apart, but those elements were good. I could tell that he is a Batman fan. He respects that material. He respects this comic book. And I would love to see his adaptation of it. But like I said, I don't think we'll ever see it at least in my lifetime, a live action adaptation. But I've been wrong before. But as far as the graphic novel is concerned, it is one of the greatest graphic novels of all time. It changed comics. It changed how you viewed comics. The bubblegum kitty version of comic books, it all went to the wayside after this comic book came out. Now, they had darker stories in comics before this. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like everything was bubblegum and rainbows. And then The Dark Knight Returns came out and it was like, oh my God. No, it was a lot of murder and foolishness that went on in comics before this. But this was such a game changer because you're taking a beloved character, one of the most popular characters in comics, and making him so adult to the point kids couldn't read this. They couldn't read this graphic novel, man. This was so rated R. And it changed how you looked at this character. We didn't get Adam West's version, campy version of Batman after this. The next film, live action adaptation that you got was Tim Burton's version, which he has come out and said that he was deeply influenced by The Dark Knight Returns. Yeah, it had a little camp to the 1989 Batman, but it was so dark and moody because of this graphic novel. The stories that were adapted from this. I listed a whole bunch of them, Christopher Nolan's version and Zack Snyder's version and so on and so forth. The Joker film. It's so much came out of this novel. And not only the Batman, but other comic characters. And that spanned not only in DC, but also in Marvel. They decided to take some more chances with grounded, darker material as well because of this comics. The influence runs deep. And I appreciate it for that. It is such a joy to have read this when it came out. I'm telling you, bro, I tell my kids all the time, they don't know what they missed not being around when I grew up. It's fun. It's all good. And I appreciate the fact that all information is at a click of a finger now. Good. That's good because I definitely need it. But it was a joy growing up and you had to discover things, picking up a comic book, taking a chance on reading a comic, and things of that nature. And it was just a fun time and discovering these new things that was a phenomenon around that time. It was talked about in school. Like, man, did you read this? Did you watch this and all this? I mean, that was fun. That was great, man. And if you didn't see it and you wanted to be a part of the conversation, you would hurry up and go find it. You would go watch that movie or you would go pick up that comic because the way these kids are describing it when I was going to school, man, this sounds like the greatest thing on God's green earth. I need to see this or I need to read this. And around this time, a lot of the people that I was growing up with, they read this comic, they read this graphic novel, and I knew I had to read it. And I read it and I felt so much joy reading it. Yeah, it was a lot of confusion that was going on, but I accepted it for what it was. And eventually I got it. Eventually I realized that, okay, this is a different Batman and I love it. So yeah, man, 40 years. It deserves its rightful place as one of the best, but that's just my opinion. I would love to know yours. Did you read the 4-issue graphic novel Batman: The Dark Knight Returns? I would love to know, what were your feelings? Are you a Batman fan? Did this make you become a Batman fan, or vice versa? I would love to know your thoughts. Where were you in 1986? What was your age? I was a little tight. I had no business reading The Dark Knight Returns. But I snuck that on in anyway. But I want to know your thoughts. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this little chit chat about the 40th year anniversary of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.